It's my very great pleasure to welcome you here today to BFI South Bank for the event that we're doing in partnership with UK Disability History Month. So the BFI is very pleased to be able to support this initiative, particularly because this year's theme is portrayals of disability then and now, and the BFI has had an ongoing interest in representation, particularly in the UK's film and television heritage. So we're well placed to be able to support an event like this. And our relationship with Richard in particular goes back more than 10 years or so, and I've just fished out an education resource that we co-produced in 2004 or so called Disabling Imagery, and this was when Richard brought to our attention the important issues in terms of representing people who have a range of disabilities and how film and television has done that in the past, and we put together quite a powerful resource, I think, which is still available on DVD. There is a paper version which is downloadable from a BFI website, a BFI web link, and also from Richard's website. And we are talking about how we can update this. One of the things, I guess all institutions are the same, although we have an ongoing interest in diversity and the representation of diverse groups, our focus tends to shift. And we're very pleased that we have the opportunity to refocus an interest in the representation of people with disabilities. So that's absolutely what we want to support. We're very pleased to be able to do that. So enjoy the day. And if you want to stay on, Richard's launching UK Disability History Month at 5:30 today, so there's an opportunity to stay and have a drink, and also to take some action, I guess, at the end of the day. So I'm going to hand over to Richard. You're in capable hands, and have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mark. Some housekeeping before we get going. Quite a few ambulant impaired wheelchair users here, so if there is an emergency, which is extremely unlikely, then what is going to happen is there is a ramp outside that left door there, and there is a ramp. You have to go through the door one at a time. There are people there who've been trained to do this, and there is quite a steep ramp up onto the concourse area outside the Hayward Gallery. They will come up behind you, and you will get away from the building. That was a new venture for BFI, which we had to plan in order to have more than 4 wheelchair users up in this room. So I'm pleased we actually managed to do that so we could get proper access. If for any extreme reason that exit is blocked, people will have to go out that way in wheelchairs, and there are then some evac chairs that will be used to get people down. But that is extremely unlikely, I think. So just so that everybody knows that. The second one is toilets. Straight across from this door, there is an accessible toilet. There's also one on the first floor down beneath that, and the others are down on floor 0 between NFT 1 and 2. So I think in this case we've got some positive action here for the wheelchair users. We don't have as far to go to the toilets as everybody else. So I'm sure others who might find it difficult to get along will use those as well. The third is that we're streaming today's event, so we're putting it out on the web live, and it will be on the UK Disability History Month website. So if there is anybody who doesn't want to be filmed, although most of you will have your back to the camera most of the time, but when we have discussion, if you'd like to signify, we'll give you a sticker now, so if anyone wants to put their hand up and they don't want to be filmed, our friend here is going to give out stickers for anybody. You'll have a little red sticker on your shoulder, but I would have thought most people aren't that worried. One person over there, okay. So that's in a good place. You're right on the edge, so we'll make sure you're out of the picture there, okay? Anybody else? Okay. Right, well, I'm very pleased so many of you are able to make it during the day. We've got a lot more people coming along to join us this evening, and they'll only get a very small flavour of what we've been through today. But I think what we need to do, really, is to take stock. The theme of this year's Disability History Month, and by the way, this is the 6th Disability History Month, always runs from around the middle of November to up till Christmas. We thought portrayal was probably the right thing to look at. we've focused in more this year on moving image. Next year, we've already fixed, is going to be language, so that will take us into literature, into journalism, into the spoken word, into the language that's used, which I think lots of people can do events locally around that. And then the following year, to coincide with SHAPE, who've got a big grant on the history of the disability arts movement, we are going to have it on culture. And there will be a programme running which is funded through that grant into schools and so on. So that lays out what we're doing. To look at this, I wanted to start by quoting Jenny Morris, who was on an advisory panel with myself and a number of other people back in the early 90s to the BBC to try and actually improve portrayal. And she did an article a little while ago that's on our website saying, well, how much has changed in the last 20, 25 years in terms of portrayal? And I think her view was that not a great deal, not what the promise of what had been expected, that we would have disabled people across all areas of the media output and that it would just be an ordinary thing. Because what Jenny said, writing in Pride Against Prejudice, if we do not appear as real people with the needs for love, affection, friendship and the right to a good quality of life, how can non-disabled people give any meaning to our lives? And I think that remains as true now as it was then. In fact, in some ways truer, because we are in a very difficult position, despite this being the 20th anniversary of the final coming into being of the Disability Discrimination Act. Things are not improving now. There's a lot of bullying in schools, though that's unlawful. Any bullying in school is unlawful, but twice as much bullying for disabled kids as others. The words spaz, spastic, retard or mong are used by 85% of 18 to 25-year-olds, and they don't think it's offensive. 85% on a survey that was done by the Anti-Bullying Alliance last year. 79% of disabled people say they face discrimination in employment. 83% say coverage about benefits grounders has negatively affected them. And half of disabled people think attitudes have worsened in the last few years. This is not a good picture. And why we thought portrayal was important this year is the media and the images of us, whether we're there at all is the first thing, whether we're there in ordinary roles or whether we're stereotyped in some sort of strange way is very important. And we thought we should spend some time today looking in more detail at that. And we've broken the day into 3 bits. So after I've done an overview, and it's not going to be just me speaking for an hour, we've got 31 minutes of film clips to see how things have changed in a moment. But then we're going to have, after that, we're going to have an actors panel, both disabled actors and non-disabled actors talking about the issue. We then, after lunch, we're going to have writers talking about how, because after all, narratives start with writers, so it's very important that we do that. And then we're going to have a break. Well, we're having something on disability film, and then tea break in the middle of the afternoon, and then a panel of producers, directors and casting directors about some of the issues that we'll identify. And what we'd like to do, and if you jot these down as we're going through the day, it would be very good. You can talk about them as well. We want to come up with, if you like, a points that we need to take forward. What still needs to change and we're talking about the mainstream media here. That's important. Okay, so some of the issues that we face have been with us a very long time. Certainly in Western culture, since the Greeks and Romans, the idea of the body beautiful, and that morality, good morality, fitted in with a good body, and bad people had deformity. And this is a very common stereotype that has been in most cultures in Western culture. Interesting enough, it didn't go across the Mediterranean into Egypt, where people of short stature, blind people, and others were venerated, but you couldn't find that in Greek and Roman culture, and you couldn't find it in the artifacts that were produced when we went back to the Renaissance, which was, after all, recreating the ideals of the Greek and Romans. And of course, we have other things to thank, in inverted commas, the ancient Greeks for. They were the first eugenicists. Aristotle thought that disabled babies should be killed. And that is something that some people are still arguing about today. So whether we should even have a right to existence. And of course, I've got on the bottom there some attempts to challenge, like there was a Japanese designer in his show just a few weeks ago, decided to have disabled models. He wasn't the first. We've had several shows like that, challenging this idea of uniformity in the body beautiful. We had the statue of Alison Lapper in Trafalgar Square for nearly a year, which hopefully got people to think about what they thought about these things. But by and large, if you look at the pressure on young people growing up, if you look at the front of magazines selling an image, selling products, it's all around a very narrow band of what it is to be a human. And many of us with impairments don't fit into that at all. So there is still much to change in this idea. A second one is that disabled people are evil, or that we're penitent sinners, or we need to become penitent sinners. And an awful lot of the world's religions spend an awful lot of time telling us that we have to repent of our sins. Thousands of people a year still go to Lourdes. I can see a friend of mine in the front row there who was taken there when she was young. And she's still the same as, in fact, everybody who went there with an impairment is, because there isn't a miracle cure. I'm not saying that occasionally, in one in several million people, something may happen which we don't understand. I'm not saying that there isn't that, but by and large, most people, all the people who go there, return as they went. But throughout Christendom in particular, but it was also an issue in Islam, that people, and of course Judaism, which both religions draw on for their fundamental books, this has been an idea that has come all the way through. And it isn't really okay for people who have told me when I've given this talk, who are involved in these religions, but it's not like that now. I said, well, look at your books. Look at what they say. Look at what people who are increasingly fundamentalists take these books to mean. They take them at face value. And therefore, we are under threat from those religions. That is the problem. And not only are we there, but people recreate this idea that evil and nastiness go together, and as we'll see in the film clips in a minute, there are many examples of that. Just a couple of examples here along the bottom there. You've got three images. One of when leprosy spread very, very quickly in Holland in around 1600. All the people who contracted it had by the government all of their wealth taken away, and they said, now you have been punished by God by getting this. So we're going to take all your wealth off you, and you have to become a penitent sinner, and the other 90% of the population will feed you and look after you. They'll get their reward in heaven, and so will you. Meanwhile, the Dutch government got a lot of money by confiscating everybody's wealth who got leprosy. Second one there, which reminds us of, we've just had Halloween, where a lot of people have dressed up as witches, but there was a real history behind that, which throughout early capitalism, from about 1600 to 1800s, the 15th century to 17th century, there were many witch hunts. Things were changing rapidly. People were moving from the feudal system to market economy, and so scapegoats were looked for. Who was the person you should pick on? The person who didn't quite fit into your community. The woman who wasn't married. Usually, it was very sexist, this whole thing. The widow or the spinster. And if she had an impairment or had given birth to a child with an impairment, that was proof positive of witchcraft. And 8 million were killed. 8 million. That's the conservative estimate in those 200 years. And the last one there, just looking at pre-Reformation church architecture, on the outside the gargoyles, keeping the hideous and the deformed at bay, and round the altar, the perfect people. If you look at altar pictures, there are no people with images, people with imperfections there. We also have been, for a long time, seen, because we're different, as laughable. As perhaps that survey of young people, and using those words that we don't find acceptable. Henry VIII had several disabled people in his court, recently very ably reproduced 500 years later by a theatre group of people with learning difficulties to show their place in the court, because the Tudors believed that people with learning difficulties, true fools, as they called them, were nearer to God, so they would speak the truth if you asked them a question. And so that's why he had these people around in his court, but also to amuse him. Second image there is of the Rake's Progress by Hogarth, and this was quite common, that people, when they went to Bethlehem Hospital, where the Imperial War Museum is now, they'd pay a penny, rich people cross the river at Vauxhall and pay a penny to look at and laugh at the crazy people. So we were seen as amusing, or this first silent movie, and in many of the silent movies, in fact 1/3 of silent movies had a disability theme. What's the joke here? Well, a guy who's a double amputee is made up to look like the other guy, and all that this film showed was the before and after of the car going over their legs. Very funny. Or of course Mr. Magoo.